He stood at the PX window as the flag rope clicked and the mess hall line slowed, a canteen cup warming his hand. An officer scoffed and pressed the form back across the counter, cornering his request. The chapel pass date looked off by one anyway. He didn't argue. He lifted a V-mail letter and a Red Cross parcel into the light, then tapped his canteen cup once, a quiet proof instead of noise. Let me take you back while the chapel hymn Hush holds the yard. Quiet men leave echoes too. Dawn braided the yard with pale wire shadow as the radio woke. Tin and soap scented the mess line. Samuel Hale leaned to the dial, breath, even canteen cup warm in his palm. The speaker cracked once. Tin cups paused mid-air. "Hold steady," he said. A guitar twanged bright as frost on a fence. "What is that signal?" someone asked. "It isn't a signal." Hale answered. "It's a song out of Abilene." Murmured German drifted through the queue. Two men stared at the tower, then at the cloth grill as if it might flash orders. "Keep your places," Hale said softly. "Breathe with me, 6 and 7 out." He set 2 fingers above the volume knob and did not turn it. 6 seconds of stillness held between the chords. Steam lifted from the coffee urn like a thin white flag. The PX bell chirped once. Code word a prisoner whispered. "Listen for the second note." "That note means home kitchens and Sunday porches," Hale said. Another twang. A tray landed too fast. Metal sang. Chairs nudged back in practiced unison, not hostile, just rehearsed. "Sir," the orderly muttered. "Do we cut the line?" "Not the line," Hale said. "The fear." He tapped the canteen cup with a knuckle. A small, precise ring rode the next chord and softened it. "Why play summons at breakfast?" another voice called. "It isn't summons," Hale said. "It's the new stateside country hour." "The stamp date is wrong," a man said, raising a V-mail clipping. "It says January 44. Paper travels slower than sound." Hale replied. "The calendar will forgive us." "We heard drums," a prisoner said. "You heard a hand brushing strings," Hale said. "Same rhythm, kinder meaning." The guitar settled into a 2-step. The mess hall tried walking to it. "Should we stand?" someone asked. "Stand taller," Hale said, "and stay where you are." He looked to the chapel corridor. A hymn drifted through the door seam like remembered bread. "I still think it's coded," a voice insisted. "Then decode with me," Hale said. "Count it with your cups, not your nerves." He tapped his cup again. 1, 2. The sound landed like a level finding true. "Say the words," someone urged. "If there are words." "You'll catch a town name," Hale answered. "Maybe Wichita." "Maybe not. That doesn't make it an order." The radio cloth puckered and released as if the speaker breathed. "Why would America send messages with a guitar?" a prisoner asked, softer now. "Because guitars mend places fear broke," Hale said. "Because music returns people to themselves." A hush formed, the kind that makes plates lighter. Steam curled in time. Hale's hand hovered over the knob again, a practiced still. He met the flinch in the room with quiet. "They thought a love song was war," he murmured. "Count with me," he said. 1, 2. The cups answered, not alarms. The guitar leaned into the verse and the yard remembered breakfast. The PX bell held its breath between verses. The next morning carried the smell of wet canvas and boiled oats. Hale stood at the guard post beside the fence, clipboard tucked under his arm, radio still quiet from yesterday's incident. Frost traced the wire. "Morning detail," Chaplain Reed asked, stepping up with a thermos. "Morning silence," Hale said. They ordered the music off until review. The duty officer appeared, boots loud on the gravel. "You triggered their fear." "Hale," half the yard froze mid-meal. "We can't have that." "They weren't rioting," Hale replied evenly. "They were remembering." "Remembering isn't protocol," the officer snapped. He lifted a paper form. "I'll need your statement every second of broadcast, every lyric." They say the phrase "call to arms" repeated twice. Hale frowned. "It's a chorus about love arms, not rifles." Reed set his thermos down between them. "Language bends under hunger," he said. "Even grace sounds like command when a man's cold." The officer pointed at the fence. "Regulation pinned them behind wire for a reason. Don't blur the edges with your porch music." "I followed the playlist memo," Hale said. "Intent matters more than memos," the officer replied. "You'll stay off the radio until the colonel clears it." A long moment passed. Hale tapped his canteen cup twice against the post, 1, 2, letting the sound travel. Reed watched the vibration fade. "That's the same rhythm you used yesterday. It keeps my pulse honest," Hale said. "Honesty can read like defiance," the officer warned. "Or like discipline," Hale answered. From the compound, a POW called something in German. Reed half translated, "They think call to arms means we're moving them east." Hale sighed. Maybe peace just sounds strange the first time. The officer paused, the pencil shaking above his form. Strange or dangerous? Reed lifted the thermos lid, poured coffee into the cold air. "Depends who's listening." Hale leaned on the rail, eyes following the steam as it drifted through the fence. "You know," he said quietly, "music never crossed the boundary, only the fear did." "Fear travels faster than sound," Reed murmured. "And protocol," Hale added, "travels fastest of all." The officer folded the paper. "I'll file this at noon. Until then, no transmissions." "Yes, sir," Hale said, steady. He turned the empty cup in his hand, tracing the rim with his thumb. Behind them, the chapel bell gave a single note flat, uncertain, unfinished. Reed glanced toward the tower. "You could have said the same message with scripture. They'd have thought it coded," Hale said. "This way they almost heard home." The chaplain smiled faintly. "Almost as dangerous work," Dangerous, Hale asked. "Or necessary?" A gust moved the fence like a breath. Reed capped his thermos, nodded once, and walked toward the yard. The officer left with his clipboard tucked tight, footsteps counting regulation. Hale remained listening to the fence hum. The sound was soft, metallic, like the aftertaste of yesterday's chord. He set the cup down beside the post. Maybe peace just sounds strange the first time, he said to no one, and the yard seemed to agree. The chapel tent smelled of damp canvas and hot ink. Sunlight slipped through seams, printing slow gold lines across the hymn boards. Hale sat near the Red Cross desk, his canteen cup cooling beside a bundle of V-mail sheets. Chaplain Reed turned one over carefully. "It's smudged," he said, "but you can still make out the chorus." He cleared his throat and began to read. "Arms that held me through the night, call me home when morning's bright." The words drifted through the tent, fragile as dust on static. A dozen POWs stood by the flap hats in hand. None spoke. Interpreter Kurt adjusted his spectacles. "No weapon words," he said quietly. "Only arms of love. It is confusing." Reed smiled faintly. "Then the translation's honest. Love usually is." Hale leaned back, listening to the soft tick of the stove. The kettle puffed steam like a sigh. "Protocol doesn't fold as neatly as faith," Reed murmured, laying the page flat. Kurt nodded. "In camp, protocol folds everything, even breakfast." The line earned a few restrained smiles. Someone coughed. Another crossed himself. Reed glanced toward Hale. "You see, it wasn't mutiny you stirred, it was memory." "Memory still breaks rules," Hale said. "Then perhaps the rules brittle," Reed answered. The Red Cross clerk slipped in arms full of small parcels. "Mail inspection done," she said. "Chocolate soap and one harmonica if the guards approve." Kurt stepped forward, eyes down. "Could we replay the broadcast quietly?" Hale hesitated. Command forbade it. "I will translate each line," Kurt said. "We will write it down. It will be slower that way." Reed looked at the guard in the doorway. A slower song never hurt anyone. The guard shrugged. "If it stays below sermon volume." Hale reached for the dial, turning it to a whisper. The guitar leaked through like breath behind glass. Kurt translated in rhythm. "The porch light waits. The supper's warm." One prisoner swallowed hard. Another stared at his boots. The tent took on the hush of a prayer unfinished. Outside, a chapel hymn wandered the wind. Reed traced the page edge, reading again. "Call me home when morning's bright." The guard shifted his stance, but did not interrupt. Hale watched the kettle's steam curl slow and sure, like words searching for place. "Tell them," Reed said to Kurt, "that peace doesn't need permission." Kurt hesitated. "If I say that he whispered, they will think it's sermon." "Then say it's translation," Reed replied. The prisoners exchanged brief glances. Someone whispered Wichita. Someone else said nothing at all. Hale lowered the volume further till only vibration remained, a pulse against the air. Reed gathered the papers into a tidy stack. "We'll mark this as evidence of calm," he said. "Evidence?" Hale asked. Proof, Reed corrected. That silence can hold meaning too. The kettle clicked off empty but warm. Outside, the hymn ended on a long note that never quite died. Dusk sifted through the wire, turning the yard bronze. The radio sat on the step like a held breath. Hale stood beside it, coat unbuttoned, one hand on the dial. Behind him, rows of men waited in the cooling light. Some German, some American, all silent enough to hear gravel shift beneath their boots. Chaplain Reed crossed from the mess porch carrying 2 tin cups. "Command gave us 7 minutes," he said. "After that, they cut power to the post generator." "7's long enough," Hale replied. "A hymn doesn't need a full sermon." He twisted the dial. The radio coughed once, then found the same station as before. A slow fiddle slid through the static, no words yet, only the ache of something remembered. A few POWs flinched. One man raised his head cautiously. Hale watched their shoulders tighten, then ease, as the second measure arrived softer. Reed whispered, "If they think it's another signal." "They won't," Hale said. "They've seen the paper now." The Red Cross clerk and interpreter. Kurt stood by the gate with notebooks. Hale nodded to them once. "Let's start the proof," he said quietly. Kurt translated, "This is the same broadcast reduced volume." A prisoner in a torn coat stepped forward. "If it's danger, we face it together," he said in careful English. "It isn't danger," Hale answered. "It's discipline. Different kind." He lifted his canteen cup and tapped twice. The metal rang true clean as a coin dropped into calm water. A dozen cups followed, hesitant at first, then steady tap, tap, pause, tap. The rhythm spread like measured breath. The song hit like a flare. Reed murmured but lit no fire. Hale smiled. "Flares still light, Chaplain." Kurt scribbled the phrase in his notes, underlining twice. The prisoners mirrored Hale's motion cups, meeting palms in time with the fiddle. The fence hummed faintly, wire trembling under the shared vibration. "They mistook rhythm for war," Reed said, watching, and found heartbeat instead. Hale turned slightly, listening to the echo ripple down the yard. "Discipline beats drag music, beats fear," he said aloud. The officer from earlier appeared by the corner shed, clipboard in hand, ready to halt it all. But he stopped. The rhythm folded around him, orderly, contained, obedient. No one moved from line. "This," he muttered, "isn't mutiny." "No, sir," Reed said. "It's alignment." For the first time, the officer didn't argue. The violin on the radio climbed toward its refrain. Hale's hand hovered near the knob, but didn't turn it. The air between chords carried every unspoken word, "Family, surrender home." Sir Kurt called softly, "They're asking if they can match the final note." Hale nodded once. The line of men lifted their cups. The final chord unfurled long and slow, and the cups struck in unison, 1-2 hold. The sound touched the fence and lingered thin, but certain, like a string stretched between languages. Reed closed his eyes. "If there's judgment here, it sounds merciful." The officer wrote nothing. He only watched. Hale lowered his cup. The echo took another breath and faded. Steam from the kitchen drifted through the mesh, curling with the last color of dusk. Someone whispered Wichita again, not as code, but as memory. Hale exhaled. Every sound that once warned them, he said now, holds them steady. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The wire fence gleamed like the neck of an instrument. The hum beneath it deepened, not from the generator, but from breath shared, rhythmic, alive. He turned the dial off. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt tuned. The mess hall smelled of barley soup and warm dust. Trays were stacked tables, half-wiped, twilight slanting through the PX window like a held breath. The radio sat beside the service hatch, its dial faintly glowing amber. Chaplain Reed stood near the wall, hands folded. Hale wiped his palms on a rag and glanced at the clock. "Transmission windows in 30 seconds, he said. "Another song?" Reed asked. "Not this time," Hale answered. "News broadcast. London relay." A few POWs drifted in quietly, drawn by habit more than permission. One carried a small parcel marked Red Cross, a loaf, some soap, a folded V-mail letter. He set it near the radio without a word. The announcer's voice cracked through static. "Ceasefire confirmed. Hostilities concluded at 1100 hours." Chairs stilled. Forks froze mid-air. No one spoke. Kurt, the interpreter, translated under his breath, each phrase slower than the last. "War finished. Return home. Letters to follow." Reed closed his eyes. Hale turned the dial one notch higher. The sound wavered like wind between fences. Across the room a guard removed his cap. Another lowered his clipboard. The parcel on the counter trembled slightly from the vibration. "Do they understand?" Reed whispered. "They feel it," Hale said. "That's enough." The announcer continued, voice thinning into static. "All aircraft returned? All hearts steady?" A faint gasp passed through the hall. Someone whispered, "Danke." Someone else answered, "Amen." Hale lifted his canteen cup, letting the steam rise into the cold air. It shimmered against the light, small and certain, like proof taking shape. Reed murmured, "You did it." The music, the order, all of it held them until this. Hale shook his head. "No one held anyone. We just stopped pushing." The kettle clicked. Outside a chapel bell rang, once soft, deliberate. Kurt said, "Should I translate the rest?" Hale looked at the prisoners still standing. "No need, they already heard it." The radio hissed again, settling into pure static. Reed reached toward the switch. "Leave it," Hale said quietly. Let the silence finish the sentence. The guard near the door lowered his weapon belt onto the table. "They said it's over," he asked. "It's begun," Hale replied. Steam drifted higher, mingling with the static until both sounds were indistinguishable. Reed placed the chaplain's notebook beside the parcel. "We'll file this under proof," he said. Proof of what Hale asked. Calm, Reed answered. Hale smiled faintly. "That'll confuse the clerks." "Good," Reed said. "Let them learn something gentle for once." The radio popped a last breath of transmission, then fell quiet. No one clapped. They just listened louder. The silence felt heavier than applause, like a shared salute no one was trained for. Hale lowered his cup slowly, setting it down without sound. Steam coiled above it, ghosting into the amber light. Reed whispered a closing line. "Peace doesn't announce itself. It just replaces noise." Hale nodded, eyes still on the cup. "Then we'll keep the air smooth." The PX bell gave one final clean note. Static faded to nothing. Snow sifted across the library courtyard, each flake catching light like dust from another era. Inside, the veterans' wing hummed with low heaters and softer voices. The brass plaque near the entrance read, "For those who kept the air smooth." Chaplain Reed Hare, now Silver Gate, slower adjusted the reel-to-reel player on the reading table. The radio bulb glowed faintly, haloing dust in a quiet orbit. He pressed play. A hiss of static filled the room, then the faint scrape of a fiddle, the same song from the yard preserved 40 years on. A few visitors paused at the shelves. One, a German man in his 60s, stood still. He carried no hat, only an envelope of photographs. Reed smiled. "You remember it?" The man nodded. "I was near the fence. We thought it was alarm. But—" he searched for the word. "Heartbeat." Reed nodded slowly. Even static remembers mercy. They both listened as the fiddle eased into its middle phrase. Somewhere between notes, the rhythm of tin cups seemed to return a phantom percussion no one played. Across the room, a few teenagers on a field trip drifted closer, whispering. "Is that real?" one asked. Reed chuckled. "As real as silence. That's what they built." He turned a dial, lowering the hum until only the softest vibration filled the room. "You hear that line?" The German man leaned closer. "Yes. Discipline beats drag music, beats fear." Reed's smile deepened. That line outlived the uniform. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a folded letter beside the radio, V-mail yellowed edges softened by time. "He wrote this before dawn broke," Reed said quietly. Said the air forgave him. The man touched the letter with 2 fingers, then began to tap his hand lightly against his thigh. Slow, measured. The same rhythm the cups once kept. Visitors noticed and followed a quiet percussion rippling through the aisles. No applause, no instruction, just alignment. Reed looked up at the library skylight. Snow pressed against the glass, muting the outside world to the same calm the yard once knew. "Funny thing," he said, "war ends, but order stays useful." The German man replied, "And music forgives the rules." The tape crackled, once the final verse trailing like breath. Reed closed his eyes and whispered, "They once mistook music for war and found peace instead." The replay hung there, bright and weightless. When he opened his eyes, the room had fallen utterly still. Visitors lingered between shelves. One child hummed the last bar without knowing why. Reed turned off the radio. The bulb dimmed to amber, then dark. Outside, snow gathered on the window ledge, erasing every footprint below. For a moment, the world exhaled, soft, even certain. Snow leaned against the library window while the hymn from the chapel faded. Under the glass case, his canteen cup caught the choir light, and Reed set a softened V-mail beside the brass plaque, tapping once to find the old rhythm, then letting the room breathe. Kindness never demands a conversion, he thought. It simply returns people to themselves the way a canteen cup catching choir light can turn static into proof, and the way numbers on a ledger become mercy when a hand stays steady on the dial. Even static kept time. The tape ticked once. Snow hushed the street. The room answered with quiet, and the old man simply listened. He kept the air smooth,